Everyone thought Clara Whitmore came to the merger gala because she could not accept being replaced. That was the story Adrian wanted. The bitter wife. The jealous woman. The one who had been given a generous settlement and still wanted to ruin the most important night of his career. By the time Clara reached the lobby of Whitmore Holdings, the rumor had already moved faster than she had. Employees whispered near the champagne wall. Board members gave her the careful look people reserve for someone they have already been warned about. And on the stage above them all, Vanessa Greer smiled beside Clara's husband, wearing white under the lights like a new beginning. Adrian looked down from the platform and gave Clara the smallest shake of his head. Not angry, disappointed, as if she were embarrassing herself. "Clara," he said into the microphone, gentle enough for the room to admire him. "This is not the place." People turned. The room did not know about the cancelled cards, the changed locks, or the divorce papers placed beside a $40,000 check with a memo line Adrian had been too arrogant to notice. Final founder settlement. Clara did not come back because she wanted her husband. She came because at 11:59 p.m., Adrian planned to sign a merger certificate declaring there were no unresolved founder claims against Whitmore Holdings. And if that lie became official, the company she had funded with her mother's last inheritance would be buried under a version of history where she had never existed. So Clara stood in the lobby, rainwater still on the hem of her coat, and let them misunderstand her for a few more minutes. The truth had waited 10 years. It could wait until Adrian finished lying. 14 hours earlier, Clara had still had a key to the house. She stood in the kitchen while Adrian's divorce attorney explained the papers across the island, surrounded by marble and silver Adrian had bought to make success look inherited. Clara remembered when they had eaten dinner from paper plates because they could not afford chairs. Back then, Clara had believed him through rejected emails, failed investor meetings, and nights when another man in a suit called Adrian's projections unrealistic. That was the part Adrian had spent years teaching himself to forget. The attorney pushed the settlement agreement closer. "Mr. Whitmore is prepared to offer $40,000 as a final resolution." Clara faced Adrian. He did not look tired. He did not look ashamed. He looked impatient, as though she were a meeting running over schedule. "40,000, Clara repeated. "It is more than fair," Adrian said, considering the circumstances. The circumstances stood in the doorway wearing Clara's ivory coat. Vanessa Greer did not step fully into the kitchen. Clara recognized the coat immediately. She had bought it 3 weeks earlier for the Meridian announcement, before Adrian told her it would be better if she stayed home. Adrian slid the check across the counter with 2 fingers. $40,000. For 10 years. For the house she sold, the trust money she released, and the pitch deck she rewrote while Adrian slept in his suit jacket. For the rooms where men asked Adrian who had sharpened the model and then laughed when he said, "My wife has a good eye." A good eye. Not a partner. Not a founder. "Sign today," Adrian said. "Tonight matters. I need clarity before Meridian." Her eyes dropped to the check. Then her eyes found the memo line. Final founder settlement. 4 words. Small enough to miss. Strange enough to stay. "Founder?" she asked. Adrian's hand twitched once. The attorney answered before he could. "It is standard wording." "No," Clara said. "It isn't." Adrian exhaled. "Do not turn a decent offer into a performance." Vanessa lowered her eyes. Only then did Clara understand the cruelty had been organized, the failed card, the locked account, the changed passwords, and the gate code that no longer worked. The house she had helped buy had learned to refuse her. A security guard brought out 1 suitcase. Inside the badly packed suitcase were a black dress, 2 pairs of shoes, medical receipts, and her mother's jewelry box. At the bottom, Clara found a folded paper she had not seen in years. It was Adrian's handwriting from the night their first investor finally said maybe. "If this works, your mother saved us both." Clara sat on the curb outside the gate with the paper in one hand and the check in the other. Rain dotted the ink. Behind the gate, the house glowed as if nothing ugly had happened inside it. For a moment, she wanted to tear both papers apart. The check, because it insulted her. The note, because it remembered a man who no longer seemed to exist. Instead, she folded them together and kept them dry. By late afternoon, she was in a budget hotel watching a business anchor praise Adrian as a self-made executive. Behind the anchor, a promo clip flashed across the screen. Whitmore Holdings and Meridian Capital, built from nothing. Clara watched her own erasure rendered in expensive font. Nothing. If Adrian had built from nothing, then her mother's house, the trust disbursement, and every late-night rewrite had all vanished from the story. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Daniel Price from Meridian's legal team. We received notice that you may attend tonight. Please understand any disruption may be treated as interference with a pending transaction. Clara stared at disruption. That was what they called a woman when she returned to the place where her name had been removed. For 10 years, Clara had thought silence was loyalty. Now she understood that being needed was not the same as being loved. And Adrian's need for her had never given him the right to erase her. At 6:42 p.m., Clara changed into the black dress from the suitcase. It was not new. It simply still fit. She placed the check, the note, and the unsigned settlement papers into her purse. Then she called the only number she still remembered from her mother's old files. Edward Langford answered on the second ring. Langford. Mr. Langford. Clara said. This is Clara. A pause settled on the line. Clara Rose Langford, he said softly. Your mother's daughter. No one had called her that in years. I think Adrian is trying to make me sign away something I did not know I still had. Edward's voice sharpened. What did he give you? She glanced at the check one more time. $40,000, she said. And 4 words he should not have written. By the time she reached Whitmore Holdings, the lobby was bright with cameras, champagne, and people who thought they understood why she had come. They would learn soon enough. But first, Clara let Adrian step to the microphone. Let him smile. Let him call himself self-made. Let him show the world how confidently a man could lie when he believed the woman who knew the truth had already been priced, packed, and locked outside. But before Clara stepped into that lobby, before Adrian turned her pain into performance, she had sat in a budget hotel room waiting for the only man who still knew her mother's name. Edward Langford arrived at 7:18 p.m. He was older than Clara remembered from her mother's framed photographs, silver at the temples, and leaning slightly on a black cane, but his eyes were still sharp enough to make the small room feel less cheap than it was. He did not offer pity, that was the first mercy. He placed a leather folder on the desk and looked at Clara not as a discarded wife, but as a client he had failed to protect for too long. Show me the check, he said. Clara handed it to him. Edward read the amount first. His mouth tightened, not with surprise, but with contempt. Then his gaze dropped to the memo line. Final founder settlement. For several seconds, he did not move. Did Adrian write this? He asked. I don't know. His attorney brought the paperwork. Adrian slid the check across the counter. And he asked you to sign today, before the Meridian event. Edward opened the folder. Inside were old trust records, bank statements, and documents Clara had not seen since her mother's funeral, all carrying the same name, Langford Rose Family Investment Trust. Clara touched the edge of the first document. I thought that money was mine to use. It was, Edward said, but your mother structured it carefully. Any major disbursement used for business formation or equity. Producing assets had to be recorded as protected founder capital unless you signed a formal waiver. Clara lifted her eyes. I never signed a waiver. No, Edward said. You signed a release to move funds. You did not sign away the interest those funds created. The words should have felt like rescue. Instead, they revealed how much Adrian had known while hiding it from her. Edward spread the bank record flat. 10 years earlier, $180,000 had moved from the trust into Adrian's original business account, with Clara listed as the initiating beneficiary. Clara remembered signing it while Adrian stood beside the kitchen sink, pale from rejection, saying he only needed one chance. Edward tapped the memo line on the check. This is why the wording matters. Founder settlement suggests someone on his side knew there was a founder issue to settle. Clara's throat tightened. For $40,000. For silence, Edward corrected. Can he still sign tonight? She asked. He can try. Meridian will require a clean disclosure. If he signs a certificate saying there are no unresolved founder claims while this exists, he creates a problem much larger than divorce. Edward pulled out a second document, marked with her mother's initials in blue ink. Your mother added a protection clause. No later transaction could erase your claim without documented notice and informed consent. Clara stared at her mother's handwriting. For years, she had thought the last thing her mother left her was money. Now, she understood it was a shield. Edward's voice softened. Rose knew you loved with both hands. She was afraid someone would teach you that devotion meant surrender. Clara closed her eyes once. Not long enough to cry. Long enough to breathe through the shame of how close Adrian had come to making her sign. A phone buzzed on the desk. Edward checked it. Meridian has acknowledged my notice, Edward said. They will not stop the event yet. But the trust documents and check will force questions before signature. What if Adrian says I'm doing this because of Vanessa? He will, Edward said. That is why we do not lead with betrayal. We lead with records. Clara picked up the old bank statement. The paper trembled slightly in her hand, but she did not put it down. For most of the day, Adrian had controlled every door around her, the house, the accounts, the guest list, and the version of their marriage people were allowed to hear. The title hurt because it was clean. 3 polished words left no room for a dead mother's house, a wire transfer, a wife's handwriting in the margins, or the years Adrian had once called survival. Then she stood. Let's go before he finishes rewriting me. The rain had stopped by the time Clara and Edward reached Whitmore Holdings, but the sidewalk still shone black beneath the lights. Through the glass tower, Clara saw the event moving without her. Waiters, cameras, champagne, and employees laughing because wealth was watching. Above the reception desk, a 30-foot screen displayed Adrian's face. Built from nothing. The Whitmore Holdings story. Clara stopped just long enough to read it. Edward noticed but did not speak. The title did not hurt because it was bold. It hurt because it was clean. 3 words polished until there was no room inside them for a dead mother's house, a wire transfer, a wife's handwriting in the margins of a business plan, or the years Adrian had once called survival. At the security podium, a young guard scanned Edward's invitation first. Mr. Langford, you're cleared, he said. Then he searched for Clara's name. His expression changed before he said anything. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. I don't see you listed. Clara read the seating chart near the entrance. The front row was printed on thick ivory cards beneath the Meridian Capital crest. Adrian Whitmore. Vanessa Greer. Graham Ellis. Board Chair, Paul Merrick. The chair beside Adrian had not been left empty. It had been reassigned. Vanessa Greer. Chief Brand Visionary. Edward set his leather folder on the podium. My client is here to deliver legal notice regarding an unresolved founder claim connected to tonight's transaction. The guard looked more frightened than firm. I was told she wasn't allowed inside. By whom? Edward asked. Before the guard could answer, Mara Keene crossed the lobby. Clara remembered once saving Mara's job after a round of layoffs. Now Mara stopped a few feet away, eyes moving from Clara's wet hem to Edward's folder. Mr. Whitmore asked that any personal matters be handled after the event, Mara said. This is not personal, Clara replied. Mara flinched slightly at Clara's voice, not because it was loud, but because it was steady. From inside the main hall, applause rose. Adrian had stepped onto the stage. His image appeared live on the lobby screen, larger than life, one hand resting over his heart. When people ask me where Whitmore Holdings began, he said, smiling into the lights, I always tell them the truth. It began with nothing but discipline, hunger, and a refusal to quit. The audience applauded again. Clara watched Vanessa rise from the front row in a white dress cut for cameras. Adrian reached down and took her hand as she joined him on stage. For years, he continued. I carried a vision others could not see. Edward leaned close. We can still serve notice through Meridian's counsel. Clara nodded. But her eyes had moved to the side monitor near the production table. A slideshow waited on the side monitor, showing the old Whitmore expansion model Clara had drawn after Adrian's first loan rejection. Clara knew that slide. She had drawn it on a legal pad at 2.13 inches the morning after Adrian's first loan application was rejected. The original footer had carried her initials, CLV. On the version now waiting for the screen, the footer had been replaced. Whitmore Holdings Internal Strategy Archive. No initials. No trace. Only the idea, cleaned of the woman who had made it usable. Clara reached into her purse and removed her phone. She took one photograph of the monitor, then another of the seating chart. Mara saw her do it. For a second, something passed across Mara's face. Fear, maybe. Or memory. Then Adrian's voice filled the lobby again. Tonight is not simply a merger announcement, he said. It is a declaration that the future belongs to builders, not to those who stand behind them and question the cost. A few people in the lobby turned toward Clara. The insult landed without needing her name. Not her name, but close enough for everyone to understand who he meant. Vanessa lowered her gaze for half a second, then lifted her smile back into place. Edward opened his folder and handed Mara a sealed envelope. This is notice for Whitmore Holdings and Meridian Capital. If Mr. Whitmore signs tonight without disclosing this claim, the certification becomes materially questionable. Mara did not take it at first. On the screen, Adrian looked directly toward the lobby cameras, as if he knew Clara could see him. Some people arrive at the end and demand credit for the climb, he said. But history remembers who kept walking. The sentence drew polite laughter. The guard stared at the floor. Clara took the envelope from Edward and placed it on the podium herself. Then let history keep the records, she said. Mara's hand closed around the envelope. That small movement did not stop the gala. It did not silence Adrian. It did not make the guests understand. But it put Clara's name back into the building before Adrian could sign it away. Mara Keene carried the legal envelope through a side corridor that smelled of coffee, warm cables, and expensive flowers. She told herself she was only doing her job. That was what she had told herself whenever Adrian asked her to move a meeting, reword an email, send a revised file, or keep Clara off a thread. At first, Mara had thought it was normal corporate cleanup. Growing companies changed stories. Founders simplified messy beginnings. Brand teams removed awkward details because awkward details made investors nervous. But Clara's face at the podium would not leave her alone. Not angry. Not jealous. Steady. Mara reached the operations room. 3 laptops sat beneath live feed monitors, and one showed the digital signing portal locked until 11:59 p.m. Adrian's chief of staff, Nolan Pierce, looked up from his phone. Where is it? He asked. Mara held up the envelope. Nolan did not take it. Mr. Whitmore said anything from Clara goes to legal after the event. It's marked for Meridian Council. After the event, Nolan repeated. Scan the receipt if you need to. Then put it in pending. Pending meant a locked drawer that no one opened until the important people had already done what they came to do. Mara set the envelope on the table. On the center monitor, Adrian's speech continued with the sound muted. Vanessa stood beside him while applause captions rolled beneath the feed. Then Mara saw the folder icon on Nolan's laptop. Archive Cleanup Pre-Meridian. Her stomach tightened. Nolan clicked it open. Inside were subfolders Mara knew because she had organized them years earlier. Early Capital. Old pitch files. Board drafts. Founder correspondence. Debt bridge. Clara W. The last folder disappeared while she watched. Deleted. Mara took one step forward. Wait! Why are we deleting archive folders during a live transaction? Nolan's eyes stayed on the screen. We're removing irrelevant personal material. Clara W. was not personal material. This time he looked at her. Careful, he said. Mara heard Adrian's voice in her memory from that afternoon. By midnight, I want the story clean. At the time, she had thought he meant the film. Now she was not sure. Nolan dragged another folder toward the trash. Founder Capital Review. Mara's hand moved before her courage caught up. She reached over and pressed the laptop shut. Nolan rose. "What are you doing?" "Following retention policy," Mara said. "No archive deletions during an active transaction hold." "There is no hold." "There is now." She picked up Edward's envelope. "You have notice of a claim." For a moment, Nolan simply stared at her, calculating whether she mattered enough to threaten. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, jaw tightening. "Mr. Whitmore wants you in the green room." Mara knew what that meant. Adrian preferred closed doors and sentences that sounded polite until your job disappeared inside them. She took the envelope with her, but she did not leave the room empty-handed. As Nolan turned away, Mara palmed a company USB drive. At the second workstation, the archive system was still open under her login, so she copied the calendar export first. The file names appeared one by one. Founder Capital Review. Clara. Adrian. Graham. Langford Trust Disbursement Discussion. Pre-Series A Equity Cleanup. Clara W. Strategy Draft Notes. Each line felt like a small light coming on in a building Adrian had tried to darken. The transfer bar crawled toward completion as footsteps sounded in the corridor. Mara's pulse pushed into her throat. She pulled the drive free and dropped it into the pocket of her blazer just as Adrian entered. He no longer looked like the man on the ballroom screen. Under fluorescent light, his face was controlled enough to make every word feel rehearsed. "Mara," he said. "You've been with me long enough to know the difference between loyalty and confusion." She held the envelope against her ribs. "Meridian needs to receive this. Meridian needs a clean closing. They need accurate disclosure." His eyes sharpened. Only then did Mara understand that Adrian was not afraid Clara would make a scene. He was afraid she had brought records. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Do not let nostalgia for my ex-wife make you reckless. Clara was kind to people. That does not make her important to this company." Mara remembered Clara handing her a sandwich at 9 p.m. because payroll had failed, then correcting Adrian's investor deck while he rehearsed nearby. Mara looked at the envelope, then at the ballroom door. "I'll deliver it to counsel," she said. Adrian smiled slightly, believing he had won. Good. But when Mara walked past him, the USB drive pressed against her hip like a secret with weight. And for the first time that night, Adrian's clean story had a copy. The first person at Meridian Capital to open Edward Langford's notice was not impressed by drama. Daniel Price had spent 15 years killing mergers for less than a misplaced signature. Personal scandal made headlines, bad disclosure made lawsuits. At 10:14 p.m., Daniel stood in a temporary conference room on the 27th floor of Whitmore Holdings, reading the first page of Edward's letter while the gala continued below. Graham Ellis, Whitmore's CFO, watched him from the opposite side of the table. "Is this serious?" Graham asked. Daniel turned to the photocopy of the check, $40,000. Final founder settlement. Then he looked at the trust summary, the wire record, and the paragraph Edward had marked in yellow. Protected founder capital cannot be waived without documented notice, informed consent, and separate counsel. Daniel removed his glasses. "Where is Adrian?" "On stage," Graham said. "Get him off it." Graham's face tightened. "We are 20 minutes from the investor Q&A. Then ask yourself whether you want him answering questions before or after we know if he certified a false disclosure." That sentence did what Clara's name alone had not done. It changed the temperature in the room. Graham opened the merger packet on his laptop. Near the end, under founder, ownership, and legacy claims, a box had been checked. No unresolved founder claims, seed capital disputes, beneficial ownership interests, or legacy trust encumbrances exist. Graham stared at the sentence. He had approved it after Adrian told him Clara's early contribution had been handled years ago as a marital matter. Now the check on Daniel's table suggested something else. Downstairs, applause rolled up through the floor. Graham called Adrian twice. Adrian ignored the first call. The second went to voicemail. On the third, Adrian answered with his stage voice still attached. Graham, this had better be urgent. It is. Meridian Legal has a founder claim notice. The pause after that was thinner than the first. Then Adrian laughed once, quietly. From Clara? From Edward Langford. Where is the letter? Adrian asked. With Daniel Price. Do not circulate it. It has already been received by Meridian. Another pause, thinner this time. Clara is upset, Adrian said. She is trying to embarrass me because Vanessa is here. Daniel heard enough. He leaned toward the phone. Mr. Whitmore, this is Daniel Price. Whether Mrs. Whitmore is upset is irrelevant. Did she provide capital to the company through a family trust? She was my wife, Adrian said. Married people help each other. That was not my question. Adrian's answer came slower than before. Through the glass wall, Clara could see the conversation forming without hearing every word. Edward stood beside her, calm in the way old attorneys became calm when a room finally began asking the right questions. Clara had expected denial. She had not expected him to look so small when pressed to define the truth without music under it. A message appeared on Graham's laptop from Nolan. Do not let them delay. A delay kills confidence. Graham read it, then looked again at the disclosure line. He remembered Clara from the old office, the marked up projections, the corrected debt covenant, the notes Adrian slid into his own folder after introducing her only as his wife. Now Graham wondered who had taught everyone to call the background her preference. Adrian entered the conference room at 10:31 p.m., with Vanessa behind him and Nolan at his shoulder. His smile returned the moment he saw Daniel. Gentlemen, Adrian said. I apologize. My personal life has become a distraction. Clara stood near the door. Adrian did not look at her first, to acknowledge her before the lawyers would make her part of the room. Edward solved that by placing the trust document in the center of the table. This is not a personal life issue, Edward said. It is a disclosure issue. Vanessa's eyes moved to the check copy. Her expression changed when she saw the memo line. Adrian reached for the paper, but Daniel placed one hand over it. Please do not remove documents from the review table. The sentence was polite. The warning inside it was not. Adrian's jaw tightened. You are allowing my ex-wife to weaponize a failed marriage against a billion-dollar transaction. No, Clara said. Every head turned. You used our marriage to hide a business debt, she said. You used my silence to call it history. And tonight, you tried to sign a document saying I did not exist. Vanessa looked at Adrian then, really looked. Nolan stepped in. This is exactly the instability Mr. Whitmore warned us about. Edward smiled without warmth. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Please put that in writing. Daniel checked the time. 12:34 p.m. We are pausing final signature review, he said. Until Meridian receives a complete founder capital packet, we cannot treat the disclosure as clean. Adrian's face went still. Outside the room, the gala music swelled for the brand film countdown. Inside, for the first time that night, the clock was no longer only chasing Clara. It was chasing him. The conference room did not explode after Daniel paused the signature review. That was what Adrian counted on. No shouting. No scandal. Just lawyers lowering their voices while a merger waited behind a locked digital portal. So Adrian adjusted his cuff and smiled. Let us be clear, he said. Clara helped me early in our marriage. I have never denied that. But help is not ownership. Edward Langford looked up from his folder. Then why did your office describe the payment as a founder settlement? Adrian's eyes moved to the check copy. For half a second, his face revealed the smallest mistake. Irritation before innocence. That was clerical language, he said. My attorney used a poor phrase. Daniel Price made a note. Your divorce attorney used corporate founder terminology by accident? People make mistakes. Yes, Edward said. They do. He removed another document from the folder, but did not place it on the table yet. Instead, he turned to Graham Ellis. Mr. Ellis, are you familiar with Whitmore Holdings' pre-Series A archive? Graham hesitated, Broadly, would you recognize internal correspondence from that period? If it came from our servers, yes. Adrian's smile thinned. Edward, unless you have something besides sentimental paperwork, I suggest we stop wasting time. Clara stood near the window. She had heard Adrian use that tone on investors, employees, and on her whenever she said a decision felt wrong. This time, she did not step back. Edward placed the document on the table. It was an email printed from an old company archive. From Adrian Whitmore to Graham Ellis. Subject, pre-series. A cleanup. Daniel read silently first. Graham leaned closer. Edward spoke only after the room had absorbed the header. Line 4, please. Daniel read aloud. Before we bring in outside capital, Clara's founder capital must be cleaned up. I do not want legacy trust questions slowing the round. A thin silence settled over the table. The words sat there with more force than any accusation Clara could have made. Adrian reached for the paper. Daniel moved it away. That email is taken out of context, Adrian said. Graham looked pale. I remember this thread. Adrian turned on him. You remember 1,000 threads. I remember this one because I asked if Clara needed separate counsel. Clara turned to Graham. He did not look proud of the memory. I was told, Graham continued slowly, that it had been handled. Because it had, Adrian snapped. Edward opened the trust summary. Handled how? Where is the written waiver, Clara's informed consent, and the record that she was told what her trust capital could become? Adrian's jaw flexed. Nolan stepped forward. This is an aggressive interpretation of family money given during a marriage. Edward turned to him. Then why did your archive call it founder capital? Nolan did not answer. The brand film countdown echoed faintly from the ballroom below. 5 minutes to film roll. Vanessa stood near the door with her arms folded tight across her waist. She had come into the room expecting an emotional confrontation. A wife. A mistress. A rich man caught between past and future. But this was different. This had ledgers. This had dates. This had Adrian's own words. Clara watched Vanessa reading the email as if seeing Adrian's face from the side for the first time. Daniel pulled up the disclosure packet again. Mr. Whitmore, this email predates your certification by several years. You were aware of a potential claim related to Clara Whitmore's capital contribution. I was aware my wife gave me money. Adrian said, do we now give equity to every spouse who believes in someone? Clara felt the sentence strike, but not where it used to. Once, she would have searched herself for blame. Now she heard strategy. Minimize the money. Mock the contribution. Turn theft into romance. She opened her purse and removed the folded handwritten note. Edward saw it and gave a slight nod. Clara did not hand it over yet. Some truths needed the right room. Instead, she placed only the check beside the email. The same man who called it founder capital in this email gave me $40,000 this morning and called it final founder settlement, she said. That is the same lie learning better vocabulary. Graham lowered his eyes. Daniel wrote something in the margin of his notes. Adrian's control began to harden into anger. You want a number? Clara? He said. Fine. We can discuss a number after tonight. But if you damage this merger, you damage the company you claim to care about. The denial was gone. Not denial anymore. A threat dressed as responsibility. Edward leaned back. Meridian should hear that carefully. Mr. Whitmore is not saying there is no claim. He is asking my client to postpone asserting it until after the transaction closes. Daniel looked at Adrian. Is that your position? Adrian realized the trap 1 second too late. His mouth opened, then closed. Outside the room, applause rose as the ballroom host announced the film premiere. Built from Nothing was about to begin. Daniel checked the time. Bula 507 p.m. We are extending the pause, he said. No final signature until we review the complete founder, capital history. Adrian looked at Clara then, fully, with the fury of a man watching someone he dismissed become procedure. Clara picked up the check and returned it to Edward's folder. By then, the paper did not feel like an insult. It felt like a door Adrian had left unlocked. Adrian did not ask permission to leave the conference room. He turned toward the door as if Daniel Price's pause was an inconvenience, not a warning. "Where are you going?" Graham asked. Adrian glanced back. "To keep 300 investors from thinking this company is falling apart because my ex-wife brought old papers to a party." Daniel stood. "Mr. Whitmore, I strongly advise you not to make public statements about the disputed founder issue. I am going to speak about resilience," Adrian said. Unless Meridian now objects to resilience, the joke found no audience. Vanessa followed because she was expected to. Nolan hurried ahead, whispering into his headset, while Adrian's camera warmth vanished in the corridor light. Behind them, Clara did not move. Edward gathered the documents. "He wants you to chase him." "I know. If you follow angry, he wins the room back." Clara watched the ballroom countdown. Built from Nothing would premiere in less than 2 minutes. "I am not going to chase him," she said. "Send Daniel the full packet. Trust clause, wire record, email, check, and send it to Graham before Nolan gets to him." Edward nodded. "Good." Clara forwarded the photographs she had taken of the seating chart and altered strategy slide. Her hands were steady now, not because the pain was gone, but because it had finally been given a job. In the green room, Adrian stopped so abruptly that Vanessa almost ran into him. "Smile when we go out," he said. Vanessa stared at him. "They just paused the signing. They paused a review." "Different thing. Adrian, that email was internal cleanup language from a decade ago. It said Clara's founder capital." His expression cooled. For 1 second, Vanessa saw what Clara must have seen that morning across the kitchen island. Not panic, not guilt, but calculation. "You are not paid to interpret legal language," Adrian said. "I'm not paid at all yet." That made him look at her. Nolan's voice came through the headset on the table. 30 seconds. Film intro ready. "Adrian, we need you in position." Adrian picked up the earpiece and lowered his voice, thinking only Nolan could hear him. "Keep the camera tight on me and Vanessa. If Clara enters the ballroom, cut to audience. She is a domestic complication, not part of the transaction." Vanessa's face changed. Not enough for Adrian to notice. But something inside her stepped back. Domestic complication. Only an hour earlier, he had introduced Vanessa as the future face of what we build next. Now she heard the category beneath the compliment. Women were useful while they improved the picture, disposable when they threatened the story. Adrian walked back into the ballroom. The applause was thinner. Word had begun to move, not the truth yet, but the presence of a problem. Adrian took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the brief delay," he said. "Growth attracts noise. Success attracts people who wish they had believed sooner." A murmur passed through the room. Clara heard it from the corridor. Edward looked at her. She shook her head slightly. "Not yet," Adrian continued. "Tonight is not about the past. It is about the courage to build when others only questioned." On the side monitor, the brand film opened with a young Adrian standing in an empty office, his voice layered over piano music. "I started with nothing but a rented desk and a refusal to fail." Clara watched the office on the screen and remembered buying the desk. She remembered assembling it because Adrian had been too depressed to get out of bed. The film cut to headlines, testimonials, glass towers, and Adrian alone at windows. There was no kitchen table, no trust wire, no CLW on a legal pad. No Clara. Vanessa stood beside the stage stairs, still wearing her public smile. But now her eyes tracked every edit. Every absence had been polished until it shone. Adrian turned from the screen back to the audience. Some people stand beside greatness and later mistake proximity for creation. The joke found no audience. At the conference room table, Daniel Price's laptop chimed. Edward's full packet had arrived. So had Clara's photographs. Graham opened the altered strategy slide first. His face tightened when he saw the missing initials. Then another email arrived. From Mara Keene. Subject: Archive retention. Concern founder. Capital Files. Attached was a calendar export. Graham looked toward the ballroom, then at Daniel. Stop the film, he said. Nolan, still behind the production table, ignored the first message. Adrian kept speaking, but his voice had begun to compete with the one thing he had spent 10 years underestimating: documentation. Vanessa Greer stayed beside the stage stairs because that was where Adrian had placed her. Not with the board, not with Meridian, only close enough for the cameras. For months, Adrian had told her she understood the future better than Clara ever had. Clara belonged to cramped offices. Vanessa belonged to scale. She had wanted to believe that. It was easier to accept a man's affection when he wrapped it in language that sounded like destiny. But as Adrian spoke over the brand film and the room grew colder around him, Vanessa watched the edits instead of the man. A rented desk, a lone founder, a first investor handshake, a skyline at sunrise, no wife at the kitchen table, no woman outside a bank after signing away her mother's house, no initials in the corner of the strategy slide. Just Adrian, polished into myth. Nolan stood at the production table. Graham had ordered the film stopped twice. Daniel Price had followed with a formal hold request. Nolan ignored both. Vanessa moved closer to the laptop. What are you doing? Nolan whispered. Checking the next cue. You don't handle cues. Tonight I handle optics, remember? The word made him hesitate. Useful optics. She had heard Nolan say it earlier that week when he thought she was outside the green room door. Vanessa is useful optics. Clara looks like the past. Vanessa looks like a future investors can buy. At the time, Vanessa had told herself that was how brand people talked. Now it sounded like a label tied around her wrist. On the laptop, the project folder was still open. Vanessa saw a file marked Meridian Brand Film Final Clean Cut. Below it sat another version, Meridian Brand Film Rehearsal with Notes. She clicked it before Nolan could stop her. The rehearsal file opened on a paused frame of Adrian in the same empty office. This version showed editing notes in the margin. Remove Clara photo from wall. Cut kitchen table anecdote. No mention of family trust. Adrian only origin story. Nolan reached across her. Close that. She did not. The next note sat beneath an old photo of Adrian and Clara in a tiny office, laughing beside an unassembled desk. The note below it read, Too much wife. Weakens self-made angle. Vanessa felt her stomach drop. She had done cruel things to Clara. She had worn her coat. She had accepted the front row chair with Clara's name erased from it because vanity was easier than guilt. But she had not known the whole room was built on the same erasure. Did Adrian approve these notes? She asked. Nolan's silence answered. On stage, Adrian's voice rose. Greatness requires sacrifice, he said. And sometimes it requires leaving behind people who mistake comfort for contribution. Vanessa looked toward the corridor where Clara stood beyond the ballroom doors. Clara was watching the screen with the expression of someone seeing a robbery described as architecture. Vanessa's hand moved to the trackpad again. There was another file attached to the rehearsal folder. Voiceover, Alt, Adrian, Raw. She opened it. Adrian's recorded voice filled the production headphones. Vanessa lifted one side to her ear. In the raw track, Adrian stopped midline and laughed. No, cut the part about Clara believing in me, he said. It makes it sound like I needed permission. The story is stronger if I built alone. A producer off mic asked, What about the trust funding question? Adrian answered, Bored. Legal says we call it family support. If anyone asks, Clara was my wife. Wives support husbands. That is not a founder story. Vanessa removed the headphones slowly. His own voice made the truth impossible to soften. Not anger. His own voice. Nolan noticed her expression and reached for the laptop. Vanessa unplugged the drive from the production station and stepped back. Give that to me, he said. No. Vanessa. The way he said her name made it sound like a contract. For one breath, she almost gave it back. Adrian had promised her a title, a future, and a place beside power. But Clara had not failed to keep up. She had been cut out. Vanessa looked toward Adrian, still speaking as if the room belonged to him. Then she looked at the drive in her hand. She did not become noble in that moment. She became honest enough to understand her own danger. If Adrian could erase the woman who funded him, he could erase the woman who decorated him. Vanessa walked past Nolan toward the conference room. He caught her wrist. She looked down at his hand until he let go. Daniel Price was standing near the doorway when she reached him. "I have the rehearsal file," Vanessa said. And the raw voiceover. Daniel held out his hand. Across the corridor, Clara turned. At last, Vanessa met Clara's eyes without borrowing someone else's confidence. "I'm not doing this for you," Vanessa said. Clara studied her for a moment. "No," she answered. "But you can still do what is right." Vanessa placed the drive in Daniel's palm. Behind them, Adrian was still talking. But the woman in Clara's seat had just handed over the thing that could empty his stage. Daniel Price did not run. Men like him moved with the kind of speed that made others clear a path without knowing why. He entered while Adrian was still speaking beneath the gold lights, the final frame of built from nothing frozen behind him. Graham followed. Edward came after him with the leather folder. Clara entered last. Not because she was afraid. Because for 10 years, every room had been taught to see Adrian first. Tonight, she wanted the room to notice who had to arrive after him to tell the truth. Adrian saw Daniel before he saw Clara. His smile held for the audience, but his eyes hardened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian said smoothly, "it appears our legal team has decided to join the celebration." A few people laughed. Daniel stopped near the front row. "Mr. Whitmore, Meridian Capital is formally extending its hold on final signature pending review." The laughter died. Adrian lifted one hand. "This is procedural. Nothing more." Then he looked toward Clara, and the performance sharpened. "My former wife is going through a painful transition," he said. "I have tried to handle it privately and with generosity. Unfortunately, not everyone accepts the end of a marriage with grace." The lie stood in full view. The public lie. Not a founder, not an investor, not a woman with records. A former wife. A personal disturbance. Adrian continued, sensing the room leaning toward him because rooms always had. Clara was there in the beginning. I will never deny she offered emotional support. But emotional support is not ownership. Marriage is not equity. And heartbreak is not a founder claim. The line was good. Too good. Edward Langford walked to the aisle and placed a single page on the front table. "This is the wire record from the Langford Rose Family Investment Trust," he said. $180,000 transferred into the original Whitmore operating account before outside capital entered the company. Adrian's jaw moved. Family support. Edward placed a second page beside it. "This is the trust clause requiring informed consent before protected founder capital can be waived." Adrian turned to the board. "A technical interpretation." Daniel added the merger disclosure packet. "This is the certificate you intended to sign at 11:59 p.m. stating there are no unresolved founder claims or legacy trust encumbrances." Board members stopped looking at Clara and began looking at Adrian. Edward set down the check copy. "And this is the $40,000 check given to Clara this morning, labeled by Mr. Whitmore's side as final founder settlement." A donor in the third row whispered, "Founder." Adrian stepped off the stage. That wording was a clerical error. Edward placed the email beside the check. From Adrian Whitmore. Subject, Pre-Series, a cleanup. Daniel read the marked line aloud. Clara's founder capital must be cleaned up before outside investment. The legal trap closed quietly. Adrian's face changed, but only for a heartbeat. Then he attacked the only person he thought the room could still be persuaded to doubt. "Old emails can be misread," he said. "Documents can be collected selectively. Clara is angry, and she has found an attorney willing to turn a divorce into a shakedown." Across the aisle, Graham Ellis stood. "I received that email," Graham said. Adrian looked at him. Graham did not look away. I also asked whether Clara needed separate counsel before the series around. You told me it had been handled. I said many things in early-stage chaos. You said she had agreed. Clara kept one hand inside her purse, touching the folded note she had carried from the hotel. Adrian spread his hands toward the audience. This is exactly why I did not want tonight hijacked. I built this company. I carried the risk. I made the sacrifices. A voice from the back answered him. No, Vanessa said. You edited the sacrifices. Every camera turned. Vanessa walked down the side aisle, with no stage smile left. She looked pale, frightened, and awake. Daniel inserted the production drive into his laptop. The screen behind Adrian flickered. His frozen, self-made portrait disappeared. The rehearsal notes appeared. Remove Clara photo from wall. Cut kitchen table anecdote. No mention of family trust. Adrian only origin story. The room read in silence. Nolan stepped forward. That is internal creative material. Vanessa turned to him. It is evidence of intent. Daniel played the raw voiceover. Adrian's recorded voice filled the ballroom, casual and impatient. No, cut the part about Clara believing in me. It makes it sound like I needed permission. The story is stronger if I built alone. A sharp sound came from somewhere in the audience. Not a gasp exactly. More like trust breaking in public. The audio continued. Legal says we call it family support. If anyone asks, Clara was my wife. Wives support husbands. That is not a founder story. Then Mara Keene entered from the side corridor, holding a USB drive and a printed calendar export. Her hands shook, but she kept walking until she reached Graham. I was asked to remove archive folders during the transaction, she said. I copied them first. Nolan snapped. Mara. She flinched, then steadied. These are calendar entries from before the Series A round. Founder Capital Review. Langford Trust Disbursement Discussion. Clara W. Strategy Draft Notes. Graham read the first page, then looked at Clara. I remember those meetings, he said quietly. You were there before the company learned how to pretend you weren't. Clara finally stepped forward. She removed the folded note from her purse. She did not read it dramatically. She simply held it where the front row could see Adrian's handwriting. If this works, she read, your mother saved us both. Adrian's face went white. That could be anything, he said. Graham answered before Clara had to. No, it was scanned into the founder archive with the first desk receipts and early pitch documents. I saw the file tonight. Adrian looked from Graham to Mara, from Mara to Vanessa, from Vanessa to Daniel, searching for one person still willing to carry the lie for him. Even Nolan kept his hands at his sides. Clara folded the note again. You were right about one thing, she said. Marriage is not equity, but theft does not become love because it happened inside a marriage. Daniel checked the signing portal. Sebelah Furzum Party 8 p.m. He closed it. Meridian will not proceed tonight, he said. The transaction is suspended pending full founder. Capital review and board investigation. There was no thunderclap. Just the clean mechanical sound of power moving away from Adrian. The board chair stood. Mr. Whitmore. Step away from signing authority until council completes review. Only then did Adrian look at Clara without an audience version of his face. You are destroying what we built, he said. Clara faced the frozen screen behind him, where his self-made image had been replaced by the notes he approved. No, she said. I am correcting the credits. And this time, when the room went quiet, it was not because Adrian had commanded it. It was because the lie had nothing left to say. Adrian did not fall in one dramatic moment. Men like him rarely did. He fell through meetings, board sessions, investor calls, and interviews where employees remembered Clara carrying files, correcting projections, and sitting just outside rooms she should have been invited into. By morning, Whitmore Holdings announced that Adrian would step back from executive authority pending review. The statement called it temporary. Everyone understood it was not. Clara did not celebrate when she read it. She was sitting in Edward Langford's office with her mother's trust documents spread across the table. Her feet hurt. Her eyes burned. Victory, she learned, sometimes arrived as exhaustion with paperwork. Edward placed a cup of tea near her hand. "You did well," he said. Clara touched the folder labeled Founder Capital Review. "I waited too long. You survived long enough to speak." That was gentler than forgiveness and heavier than comfort. The legal battle lasted 9 months. Adrian's attorneys tried to call the trust transfer marital support, Clara's strategy work informal advice, and the rehearsal notes creative shorthand. But the wire records, the email, Mara's calendar export, Vanessa's raw voiceover, and the $40,000 check remained. In the end, the settlement was not quiet. Clara's founder interest was formally recognized. She received equity compensation, restitution tied to the trust capital, and a public correction listing her as a founding capital contributor and early strategy partner. The court did not give Clara back the years. But the record changed, and after being erased so carefully, the record mattered. Adrian kept wealth, but not the myth that had made him untouchable. Vanessa resigned before the investigation closed. She never became Clara's friend, and Clara never pretended the damage vanished because Vanessa told the truth. But when reporters tried to make her the villain or the savior, Clara said only. She stopped carrying a lie that was never hers to own. Mara stayed at the company under new leadership. Graham testified before the board, and later stepped down as CFO, saying he had learned too late that neutrality could become camouflage for cowardice. 6 months after the settlement, Adrian came to the old Rose house. Not the mansion he had locked Clara out of. The smaller house her mother had left behind, restored with quiet money and quieter care. Clara found him beyond the garden gate, thinner than she remembered, holding no flowers, no documents, no cameras. "I miss you," he said. She believed him. That was the hardest part. "I miss who I thought you were," Clara answered. His face tightened. "We could start over." "No," she said. "You want to return to the last place you felt forgiven." "I'm sorry. I know." "Then why won't you let me in?" Clara rested her hand on the gate. For years, every door in her life had opened or closed according to Adrian's comfort. This one was hers. "Because forgiveness is not an invitation," she said. "It is the place where I stop carrying you." Adrian lowered his eyes. She wished him peace. Then she closed the gate. 2 years later, the front room of the Rose House held desks, legal pamphlets, child-care brochures, and women who spoke in low voices because fear had trained them not to take up space. The Langford Rose Financial Freedom Fund grew from Clara's settlement, equity income, and her mother's trust, helping women locked out of accounts, threatened with nothing, or told their unpaid labor had no value because no one had written it down. On a spring afternoon, a young woman named Elena sat across from Clara with a settlement offer in her hand. "He says this is generous," Elena whispered. Clara studied the number. Then she pointed to the wall. Inside a simple glass frame was a copy of the check Adrian had given her. $40,000. Final founder settlement. Elena frowned. "Why would you keep that?" Clara stood beside the frame for a moment. Once, that check had been meant to make her disappear. Now it was the first thing women saw when they came to learn how not to vanish. "Because that was the price he put on my silence," Clara said. Then she returned to the desk, opened a fresh legal folder, and slid it gently toward Elena. "And this is where we find out what your voice is worth."